inviting me over. It's a really pleasure to actually share with you experience that we had with UCL so far. When I was preparing that presentation, I was thinking what actually you would be interested to hear from me. So perhaps I'll share you my personal experience as a researcher or also an employee of UCLH. UCLH really wanted to explore the possibilities of BIM and see how we can implement it to work to our advantage. So as an operational and a managerial tool, but also to kind of introduce collaboration more organized and synchronized way, as usually it used to be very much dispersed process. So for BIM, for us, started really 2 years ago with our Macmillan Centre Cancer Centre. But really we want to drive it forward. And for us, BIM was more of a collaboration process, not as much as maturity levels, because there's still a huge misunderstanding in terms of maturity levels. We kind of been mandated maturity level 3 early on at our PBT phase 4 project, which at that time didn't even exist. It still doesn't exist. So for us, it was a huge downturn in terms of the learning curve. And it's all about continuous learning. So really, we started gathering best practice examples from all over the world, United States, Germany, Scandinavia, UK, and kind of gathered the best practice examples. But saying this, actually, there's no one way to do certain things. It's whatever works for you and works for the client. We wanted to drive change. Recently, we appointed a new framework partners, in total 75 different partners from different industry, from the industry, from different disciplines, and we try to really drive that change the culture, change the language, and start actually thinking in the same mind frame what we want to do. We want to really push the boundaries in terms of BIM, what is possible. We know what is possible right now, but really we think about 2019 when we complete proton beam therapy and phase 4, also phase 5 and further projects. But the most important is to actually have vision, what we want to achieve, and have a visionary people, and I'm very fortunate to work with one of them. So we really started off creating a BIM strategy. What would be our strategy, what we want to achieve? We worked with our supply chain partners and tried to actually evolve what we've got or currently, think how to innovate it, but actually in the end achieve a whole transformation. So all our capital development projects, we kind of aim to achieve not savings, but actually eradicate 20% of waste, and that will be a huge difference to us. But also focusing on FM through embracing early collaboration, and that, trust me, makes a huge change. And kind of embracing BIM standards, which constantly kind of appear and are getting re-engineered all the time. So let's focus on our BIM journey. Like I said, 2 years ago, we have been handed over phase 3, which is a Macmillan Cancer Centre, and it is on the left-hand side, in the bottom. That was supposed to be a BIM project. Unfortunately, it was just a 3D model that at that time kind of worked for the contractor. And we didn't really think that much of it. Now we are in the process of PQQ for phase 4 PBT. And we've started with BIM at that project, again, really too late, about a year ago. We started with execution plan, actually setting out objectives, goals, what we want to achieve. At that time, we thought that it was achievable. Perhaps now we kind of said really what is attainable at that stage, but really pushing the boundaries. We've got phase 5 that is now in a feasibility study process, and thinking about further phases and implementing BIM on an incremental basis. As I mentioned to you, we just introduced a new framework that really had mandated on them BIM. And again, there was a problem because a BIM for every one of us means something different. So we had to selectively choose people that kind of merged with us and aligned their processes to ours. So recently, 18 months ago, we had 2 departments, capital investment and facilities departments, 2 separate ones. And really following BIM ethos, we decided to merge those 2 departments together to create a directorate where really there's no clash between OPEX, CAPEX, how much we're going to spend, and the communication between those 2 departments improve. So once we actually implement BIM, we know that we can hand over to our FM colleagues, and they know how to work with it. For that purpose, we organised multiple sessions for BIM, where at that time nobody really knew what it was, apart from a few, and said what are the benefits for the FM, and kind of trying to get everybody on the right page. The biggest problem is, I think, that everybody speaks different language. Not everybody thinks what benefits it could bring to them, and what kind of terminology is we actually using. So we kind of embraced the ethos of BIM, looking into what we can get for every discipline, so planning and program, property services, capital projects, and facilities management, and try to engage with supply chain partners as much as we could, as well as governing bodies, so Cabinet Office, but also thinking in the end about the users, what kind of benefits we can bring to our clinical staff and the patients in the end. So going back to the culture and process alignment, we all know that there's so many different processes and frameworks that we're working towards. So NHS is working towards a Blue Book, which has been established in 1989 and then renewed in 1991. And obviously a lot of us are still working towards REBA Stages 2007, which recently have been updated. So the biggest challenge for us was to make sure that everybody is on the right page and speaking the same terminology at least, and knowing what to expect from who at what time, and getting the right information at the particular stages, as BIM is, as we know, all about the data and information. So we started to develop really a strategy. This particular strategy is for phase 4 PBT. Like I said, we started slightly later, so we're trying to kind of embrace BIM as much as we can, but considering the boundaries and legacy that we kind of got from that and the late adoption, but still know what we want at what stage and who we actually have to engage with and who is responsible for it. The strategy for phase 5 is a lot more elaborate because we started with phase 5 from the inception on BIM. When we tendered for the design team, it was quite a challenge because we had to cherry pick the right people with the right capabilities. And the weighting for BIM was 40%, so it was pass or fail. You either do BIM and you do the BIM in the right way, what we want you to do, or you're not going through. And similar approach is going to happen with a phase 4 PBT, as the majority of the questions are around BIM. So if we've got any contractors on board, I would welcome any tenders for me. Basically, it's again about the capabilities, how well you can work with us and collaborate with us and deliver what we want, adding your innovation. We've got also future projects, and future projects meaning not only the big schemes that everybody is talking about, but also we've got a huge profile of buildings, and we're trying to implement BIM on a very incremental basis. So if we want to fit in a new kitchen or a new word, it needs to be updated. It needs to be all in BIM and led in very, very collaborative way. And that's it. Thank you very, very much.
Paulina, that's much appreciated. You're back on. We're back on time again. Just while Paulina is standing there, are there any questions that anybody would like to ask Paulina? It's just, I think it's really interesting the journey you're on, and in fairness, I think it's probably maybe a look into the future for some of us in terms of where the whole focus is going. And what I talked earlier on about people, because you know, if I look at it into say what Paul is saying, what I was saying, and what Paulina is saying, and what I look earlier on about the importance of people, and in terms of if you're making a selection, and at times we made selections based on people and their ability to work together. Now the selection is based not alone just on the people, but their use of technology as how that you can't work together just as individuals. Now you have to work together through the power of technology. So I think that's really interesting. I think that the waiting for BIM is most interesting there. So I mean, again, in terms of say for designers and contractors to possibly see where the business is going really. So any questions for Paulina? Right, John.
Pauline, I would be interested in hearing briefly your opinion on the maturity of the predictions on things like energy usage, carbon reduction, etc. If you feel you're able to achieve with present technology.
The aim was at first when we started to achieve 20% savings on capital investment and 70% on FM overall, including the efficiency, energy efficiency. Obviously, now when we actually conducted research, looked for best practice examples, there's no kind of a tangible results that we can drive from and say, actually, we'll definitely achieve that. In the execution plan, early execution plan, we set at least 40% to match the London plan for CO2 emissions reduction, and kind of at least monitor that whether we actually can achieve it. But I think that the core is whether it is possible. So in our 10 documents, when we set up our ERRs with our consultants and cabinet office, they kind of said, well, you know what, you can't really ask for the sustainability questions, and you can't really ask for a reduction from the contractor just because it has not been done before. So you're not really allowed to kind of mark somebody against something that hasn't been done. So even though we are pushing for the innovation, we want to see that kind of data. But I don't think that, because it hasn't been done and it hasn't been proved yet, I don't think that we can ask as a mandate to achieve certain savings in efficiency.
Given the maturity of the industry, even putting a sort of high weighting, on limiting attendance, but are you getting a pushback from people?
Loads. Just even during the interviews in framework, a lot of people said, you know that you're expecting something that has not been done really industry-wise, and people said, fair enough, we'll deliver you BIM, but BIM to what we understand as BIM, or to what currently the standards and government say. Unfortunately, there's a lot of BIM buzz around, and there's a lot of talk, but not a lot of those things actually substantiate. So I guess it is really what it is. A lot of people will argue and push back and say we will do only as much because they're honest, or they will promise you everything and say we can do whatever you want to, but actually not deliver. So I think that it's best to work with the supply chain partners and say, this is what we expect. I know what is possible at that time, but we're going to drive the change, try to innovate, try to push the boundaries, and see what happens. So I think that it's good to have that pushback factor and work with supply chain rather than actually thinking that somebody can do that and then later not deliver, which kind of happened on our Phase 5 project, where people said, we can give you anything you want to, but in the end, when it comes to actually delivery, there are some flaws in that. We need to be realistic, I guess.
Yes, sure.
We've been told here in Ireland that for the past 2 or 3 years that the UK is racing ahead with its adoption and implementation of BIM. But it's interesting to hear you say that basically you're probably at the same level that we are, maybe slightly ahead, but around the same.
To be honest, we've been trying to really attend those events quite a lot. We're working closely with Cabinet Office, and a lot of the information that has been passed to us is that UCL is really the first client-led project like that. Usually it's more a contractor-based and contractor-led or even design-led process. And I think that in terms of BIM, everybody is now on a very, very steep learning curve. Everybody is trying to make something BIM that the BIM could do for them. And allegedly, we are the first ones to adopt fully the BIM protocol. So I don't think that really a lot of people are doing it right now. They're trying bits and bobs, whatever that it suits them, but not a very very encompassed way and thorough way.
I think there was a date of 2016 mentioned for the UK for all public jobs, but we're now in 2014, and to try and get all public jobs.
I think that 2016 is very, it's very aspirational date, and I don't think that the whole industry will be at that level by 2016, just because, as we know, IFC standards are still developing and it's still not there. A lot of even government consultants, they're still learning, trying to get a grip of what they can achieve with BIM. In terms of maturity, I think that as long as we get to level 2 by 2016, that will be a remarkable success.
I'll just take 2 more questions. Well, there's 2 here this time.
Collaboration. it was collaboration. I think that a collaboration, even though everybody says we collaborate, I think that there's a lot of work to be done in terms of collaboration, because there's so many different parties that they want different things, but if it's not really a client-led and client-coordinated project, fully client-coordinated, there will be always disjointment because you've got so many different parties, so many different companies. Even I could tell you within our department, there are different interests. So facilities will have different interests, capital investment will have different interests. So I think that a collaboration and making sure that everybody is talking in the same language, talking at the same level and wanting the same thing, and trying to get to the same target, that's the most important. That's why we introduced a series of workshops where we kind of gather the most important people or supply chain and try to talk where we are and what we want to achieve. I think that having one single software is a huge thing. On phase 5, we had a time where we had one member of a design team that actually incorporated different modules, and this didn't work that well. So I think that a collaboration is the key to kind of unravel the BIM for the client.
I probably asked the same question. You mentioned flaws in the process. I think that's the question's answer. They were typically around ownership of the data, discrete levels of data, priorities, can you give us a specific example maybe of this?
The ownership is not much of a big deal, just because we introduced our protocol where the ownership comes back to the client in the end, so we can actually utilize the library later on for us in the wider estate. So it wasn't as much about the ownership, it was more about talking in the same language, achieving the same target rather than working aside of each other and having kind of the same objectives. In terms of the data, you need to know exactly at what point other party will need that data. So QSs will need certain data at certain time, and this was not communicated in the right way. I think that having protocols for communication and data drops is the key, really, because knowing your roles and when you need to fulfill those roles is really the key.
Okay, that's great. Just a couple of other points there that Paulina had made, I think are sort of very incisive, is that UCL have a vision for, there's a reason for doing it. It's not just about saying, well, we'll try out technology. There's actually a reason for it on the basis of return of investment. She uses a great word. I was going to say eliminate, but she's more forceful. She says eradicate 20% of waste, which is, but as I said earlier on, that's where real value is in terms of eliminating waste. And the other thing is supporting the FM afterwards. And the other point which I thought was really clear there is that there's a recognition of the capex and opex as being together, and we in very many cases we do see them differently and we act differently, and I see how you have dealt with it. You put that into an organisation. So I think just in terms of my own role in the Children's Hospital, thank you for coming here today, and I have no doubt that we'll be tapping into some of your knowledge and experience afterwards. So could we thank Paulina?